This week on the SEO Weekly, Bard gets in the location and image games. Get interesting as a search engine Bard. Also, some first impressions of SGE and local SEO. A new tracker to be able to track SGE screenshots and queries and whether that's changing over time. And finally, a little bit of negative SEO. What you need to know to educate yourself to present this weird thing that can happen to your featured snippets. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of iPullRank, and every week I cover everything going on in the world of SEO. We're talking Google updates, blog posts, AI and SGE, podcasts, SEO Twitter, webinars, tools, you name it, I'm on it. If you're into this stuff, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, leave us a comment, share on the socials. I genuinely appreciate it. It's kind of a regular week, so let's dive in. Not too many Google updates this week. Last week, there was an outage on reporting from Google Search Console. Now, they did let us know that indexing, crawling wasn't actually impacted, just the reporting in Google Search Console, but that was solved, even though it took 3 days or so. And then also, if you have a property that's not associated with Google Analytics, in the past it's been hard to get the Google Search Console information. Now there are other associations with other Google properties. So still in the Google ecosystem, but you don't necessarily need Google Analytics. Reminder, by the way, GA4 is coming at the end of the month. If you haven't already signed up for it, then you should definitely make sure that that's happening. That said, shout out to Simo Ahava, who did a whole rant about the problems, opportunities, but mainly problems around GA4 and what he's looking at as we get closer to that final sunsetting of Universal Analytics and moving over to GA4. So check out his article, super helpful. So there was an episode of Search Off the Record, which is the podcast by Google Search Advocates. So this week it was John Mueller and Martin Splitt and Garrett Illyes, and they were taking questions from LinkedIn, which is actually interesting that they were engaging with that social network, addressed a whole bunch of different questions, like why Google Search Console kind of combines 404s and 410s because of the implementation, the intention. It's like working as intended. They talked a little bit about kind of made up top level domains in the crypto world, like .eth, and how it's kind of pointless to use them because Google can't crawl them or index them. So they're kind of like these vanity domains that just are getting you back to whatever this original source is. And then finally, they talked about like kind of building their dream search engine example. And it was funny because they did dive into Google Plus and, the improvement of using a social brand reputation, or not brand, but just a reputation management element of search, but how social signals are problematic because they can be manipulated. If you're going to a source for a social program and it shuts down, all of a sudden you can't use that signal anymore. All in all, really interesting podcast episode. Love when those guys just do their banter thing. It was quality. So a couple of weeks ago, remember, John Cooper had a really great roundtable with Cyrus Shepard, Marie Haynes, and AJ Cohn talking all about generative AI, LLMs, what's happening with our industry. And you can tell that John is into it because he had a ton of other conversations with people all around the industry and did his own research and deep dive. And last week put out this really epic post all around the purge and kind of the implications of LLMs for SEOs and content. And, he was kind of dire in the sense that, SEO agencies or content agencies might ultimately, or content creators might ultimately get hurt by this next paradigm, this next version of the way that LLMs and Google's SGE ultimately pull content without repercussions, without citations, or without quality citations from content creators, and will change the nature of the web going forward. He addresses a lot of the potential issues in adoption. He looks at the past, the present, and the future. Ultimately, it's a really good read. And if you haven't been paying attention to what's been happening over the past 7+ months in the world of ChatGPT, OpenAI, Google, etc., check out John's article. He is hot on the trail journalism of this world of LLMs. And then A nice other complimentary epic post by Mark Traphagan of SEOClarity talks all about SGE, specifically navigating it, why it's really problematic. He points out the idea that Google was probably trying to be incredibly cautious, and that's why, it doesn't want to put any sort of really problematic, offensive results or wrong results, especially for your money, your life. And that's why even though it's only being rolled out to a small experimental group, that the results are kind of meh in the SEO industry. He also talks about a lot of issues with trusting the results, which I've been thinking about a ton, in terms of the generative AI text. Like, are people going to actually trust what is this steroid featured snippet result? When you look at it, I still, for myself, found that I wanted to find out where it came from and whether or not I could actually confirm that the content was accurate, because we all know at this point that generative AI does put out complete hallucinations and infactual content. I haven't necessarily seen that from Google's search generative experience myself, but the results aren't necessarily better than the top results for a given search result at this point. If you're curious about the search generative experience, I did a deep dive last week on the SEO Weekly, where I talked all about different types of queries, different types of results, everything you need to know. But Mark's post is really helpful. He also goes into what you can do to prepare, because inevitably, whether the results are good or not, SGE will be coming to, most likely, not definitively, but most likely coming to search results maybe by the end of the year, maybe early next year. It depends. Barry Schwartz did call out that there is this noted experiment that the experiment ends for SGE at the end of the year. So maybe that's a clue that'll be coming out. Anyway, Mark talks about ideas about how to really up your, especially for shopping and e-commerce, to up your structured data, information, images, a lot of the basics of SEO, but the things that you really need to make sure that are tied together tightly so that you're more likely to show up in these search generative experience results. Aleda Solis actually pointed out that it's that much more important to have your product description pages really tight, because a lot of it is getting pulled from those. And that's what Google, as I mentioned last week with Google Merchant Center Next, will be pulling more from the actual websites than just your Google product feed. So those two articles are absolutely worth reading. They're deep dives. A lot of it is existing help and support for what's been happening, but also a lot of predictions for the future. Now, none of us know, but it's very important to pay attention to what's going on. Speaking of SGE, I would love to help you have you help me participate in what I'm creating. Is this open source public spreadsheet that's tracking search generative experience query results. So if you have access to the experiment, it's really interesting to think about how quickly the results are changing. And so you'll find the link to the spreadsheet in the show notes, and everyone can use this to source for their own research. But basically the idea is you have your query, you have the date, and you have a screenshot of the results. So we can start to see over time if the results are improving, where we can see any sorts of trends with certain types of queries. I would love for you to help me out, so please jump into that. Really awesome article by Ryan Jones put out on SEOTesting last week, all about the top 10 AI tools to improve your SEO workflow. Basically, some of them are generative AI tools. Some of them are kind of research based on the internet, kind of pulling information like ClearScope and Surfer SEO and Phrase.io, or even just like keyword clustering, like Keyword Insights, or just SEO testing, like SEOTesting. Obviously, it wasn't on the list, but Exact Science does, ChatGPT enabled keyword segmentation for rank tracking. Some of the other ones were like Sonic, Grammarly, obviously, Google Bard and Bing Chat, etc. A good article with all the pros and cons, a couple of screenshots, and why they'd be useful for you in your SEO work. In the world of SEO, Twitter, Glen Allsopp, who we've covered in the past, had some really great affiliate blog posts where he looks at the financial reports from bunch of major industries, specifically in the media. Had to say about this from John Steinberg, who is the CEO of Future, which owns, as you can see, Tom's Guide, Marie Claire, Tech Radar, PC Gamer, and talked all about the threat of the generative AI sort of search engines like Bing and Google. And he said it's really not in the best interest of Google not to have links to media publisher content creators websites and send search traffic that way, some sort of hybrid. You can't just get all your answers from a little paragraph and that's that. People want to do their research. They want to get other perspectives and opinions and get experience, all this EEAT from someone who's actually done that. That can't be done through just a generative text without references or links. So it's interesting to see his perspective, and I agree. I think there's going to be an ideal version. We're not there yet, but an ideal version that has basically compiles all the best information from various publications and then links back to them. Because, as I mentioned earlier, you'll want to kind of follow up and researching deeper dive into the content that's put out by generative AI. I don't know if it's trustworthy yet, and who knows if it'll ever get there. Interesting tweet. Aside from a healthy dose of cynicism and snark, Pedro Diaz is a great follow on Twitter, constantly sharing his SEO opinions and insights, and he put out a great thread that I want to read through. I just think it's highly worth kind of consuming from a technical SEO standpoint. He wrote, in case you're new at this, canonicals don't manage crawl, no index doesn't manage crawl, server redirects don't manage crawl. Crawl can be managed through for XX HTTP status, robots.txt directives, other server configs. Once you're done with managing crawl, then you can start to worry with managing indexing. And here's where you can use canonicals, no index directives in the HTML, server-side redirects, strengthen it using internal linking, XML sitemaps, quote unquote. But if I make a link JS only, I'm managing crawl. Yes, if a URL is not exposed, retrievable, you're managing crawl. Also, if you take your site offline. As a last note, it's worthy to mention disallowed URLs can end up being annotated in search results despite being blocked. This doesn't mean they're being indexed, hence I wrote annotated. This might happen if there are links pointing to these URLs, internal or external. These annotated URLs are often not problematic, which meant to be blocked. When meant to be blocked, and usually won't rank for normal queries and won't eat up your crawl budget. They might appear for very specific queries though, like site : this doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem need fixing. So some great insights around crawling, managing your crawl, managing indexing. It's always important as an SEO to understand the difference between the two. Just because your site is crawled doesn't mean it's indexed. However, you can have, URLs that are blocked that do show up in the search results despite not actually being indexed due to URLs pointing internally, externally. Great thread there from Pedro. Highly recommend that you follow him. In the world of local SEO and the SGE experiment, Miriam Ellis, who writes for Moz and someone who I've respected her opinion of local SEO for a long time, got her first impression of the experience from a local perspective. And it was really cool to see her on this Twitter thread go through piece by piece what UX worked, what didn't, how it compares to the normal search experience. So looking through it, she points out, right away you get into this 5-pack that, way back in the day, they gave you 7 results for the local pack, then knocked it down to 3. Now we're seeing 5, but she's seeing as she clicks into it, there's some UX issues, you get stuck there. But the results, the whole thing is self-contained, and she really liked that as a local SEO. Now, the links, follow-up options she thought were links, so that was confusing. So it's interesting to see that first impression that it would click out, but when she did click it, she realized it was just another follow-up SGE experience. Beyond that, She found there was some frustration with, using the local back, but that when you did see that change from the follow-up questions or any nuance change to the query, you get a completely different local pack. She highlights she likes the conversational nature, that she didn't have to restate that she was in San Francisco looking for the best tacos. And Miriam, Reddit's amazing. I'm surprised you didn't have such, didn't have an understanding of what it offered, because for local queries, Reddit is great. I love the Nova Reddit. Being in Northern Virginia, I check that out all the time for looking for local recommendations. All in all, it sounds like she had a positive experience for SGE as a local journey, and we'll keep an eyes peeled on to what that means. But there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of insights for local businesses to pay attention to this when it is ultimately rolled out in just normal search. Not yet, but it'll get there. Everybody's getting in on the chatbot. Thank you, OpenAI. In fact, Search Engine Land has put together their own little nifty chatbot that's trained on all of the articles that have been published on SEL. So kudos, that's cool. I tried it out. I asked it the classic, who are the best SEO experts in the industry? And as you can see, we got the standard response. The Ram Fishkins and the Neil Patels and all that jazz. So, it's always interesting to see where the answers are coming from and what a search engine land content compendium would influence for a question like that. But just remember that the conversations are recorded to continue to help them do their research, then also obviously probably continue to train it on future stuff. So cool little nifty job there, Danny and the team at Search Engine Land. Don't be nefarious, don't be negative, but the reality is negative SEO is out there, and Oliver H.G. Mason is helping us educate on the matter so we can protect ourselves. What he found was the whole ability to report a featured snippet as outdated content, which then gets removed from the results. If you own the domain that is reported, you can cancel it in Google Search Console. He breaks it down. But if not, like if it's a Twitter, as he shows in the example that he did, the Screaming Frog, then there's really not a lot you can do about it. It's nasty. Don't do it. Try to protect yourself. But if you're focusing on appearing for the featured result for other people's properties, you might be out of luck. Cool article and good insights there. Back to the world of local SEO. I know we always think about Google, but obviously we've been talking about Bing more and more these days when it comes to SEO and search and all those good things. Well, local SEO, Apple is a player. I don't know if you laugh at the fact of Apple Maps exist, but and it had its issues over the years, but surprisingly, there's still 12% people who use Apple Maps, and you need to make sure that your local business is represented on there, claiming your profile, all that jazz. Bright Local, Sammy Paget, and Claire Carlisle did a great poll where they were asking business owners if they are aware of, Apple Business Connect and whether or not they, have access to their listing there. And they found that 58% of businesses have not claimed their Apple Maps listing. That's a problem. 59% of businesses are unaware of Apple Business Connect's features. 88% of people use Google Maps compared to just 12% of Apple Maps, and just 16% of businesses are making use of Apple Business Connect. There is, especially like in the US, a big iPhone contingent that just uses their default maps. They use Apple Maps. They don't think about it if they're using it to find a local business. And I know I use Google Maps all the time to find businesses with Google reviews and whatnot. You need to pay attention to it. Great poll, worth paying attention to, especially if you're in the US. So a really important article by Jess Schultz on Search Engine Land, all about brand building using entity SEO. It was announced this past week that Bard is now including location. You can access your location if you give it permission and provide images in the results. Bard is moving more and more to a complementary search engine, or people using it for search functionality similarly to the search generative experience. And in this article, just breaks down how brand building is so important for your entities, because a lot of the results that Bard is pulling its answers from are tied to the knowledge graph and entities, not specifically just like URLs and links, or keywords, but as the actual idea of the thing, the brand, the entity of it. And so she breaks down how important it is to get your CMO on board, get sponsorship, to make sure that your brand is being recognizable all over the place, but also having that real digital footprint. She goes into using structured data, for entity and semantic SEO markup. She talks about topical relevance and making sure that you appear for all the sorts of, industry related content that's out there for your brand, and getting your brand kind of in check, looking at Jason Bernard and what they're doing over at CaliCube, or we have partnered a lot with WordLift in the past in terms of getting that entity recognition and brand building. It's an important article with practical applications. Well done, Jess, especially if people are going to be using Bard for search. You want to appear there. You have a different type of control for the knowledge graph than specific keywords and brand building there. Really solid article by Gus Peloggia talking all about how product management principles can make you a better SEO. I remember we've covered Holly Miller Anderson on the SEO Weekly in the past. We're talking all about the actual SEO product manager and what that entails, that communication between, the developer, the engineers, and the SEO and the content creators, and that cross collaboration. Well, Gus put together this really great article. His definition of what it means is an SEO product manager discovers, builds, tests, and iterates product features that support your audience, humans, and bots to achieve a given goal. These are usually technical features built together with engineers and other teams. He breaks down this kind of technical approach between A/B testing, tasks, and initiatives. Really helpful perspective. And he's a super nice guy too. So if you ever have questions about what that looks like in practice, definitely reach out to him on Twitter. Awesome article. Last week, I was part of an awesome webinar with Jeff Coyle of Market Muse. We broke down everything from the State of Generative AI report that we put together. You can still download that. The link is in the comments. Check out the webinar. It was an hour of just talking about how businesses really need to think about incorporating generative AI into their content strategy, what it looks like going forward. It's an important conversation that most businesses are already considering. If you're not, you got to think about it. Who's in charge of your content? What are the policies that all employees should consider when using generative AI? What tools are they allowed to use? How do you instill a consistent brand voice? Talked about all those things. And speaking of brand voice, I had a really great conversation on the Rankable podcast with Jacob Clark of NerdWallet. We talked all about building an SEO-driven content strategy, getting content and EEAT all up into your content, and NerdWallet is so good at that. Jacob had a lot of insights. I mean, he's worked for the credit card vertical, the travel vertical. Let's see what he had to say about EEAT.
Yeah, I think what's been really helpful is when I was working with writers who are going to be kind of producing the content based off the content briefs that we've created, is really being mindful that they're including information that isn't found on other pages. I think you used the term information gain earlier, which is related to that idea. And I think the reason that's so important for EEAT is that if someone is like a true expert on a topic, they shouldn't just have to rehash what's already ranking. So for example, if you're writing a page on like social media marketing for restaurants, somebody such as myself who has no experience in doing that, I could open up the top 3 pages, compile all the tips, kind of rephrase some things, and, get a 1,000 or so word article that's really just rehashing what's already out there. But somebody who's a real expert on social media marketing for restaurants, they can just kind of do that off the top of their head. They don't have to open up the results at all. They could just produce a great piece of content that includes real examples of campaigns they've done, what works, what doesn't. And so any of those like stories or information that you could add that isn't on those other 3 pages, I think is a good way to show that Google that you're not just rehashing what's out there. You're actually an expert on this topic who can produce kind of like brand new information there. And so along those lines, that can be like sharing personalized experiences. If you aren't the expert, you can share quotes from experts. I think things like including unique images that aren't found elsewhere on Google is good proof that you have the product or have visited the place. And so any of those signals, I think, are good ways to show that you're truly an expert on the topic.
So there you have it. Another episode of the SEO Weekly in the books. A little more low key this week. No mind-blowing search drop bombing things happening. We could all take a little bit of a breath. Thank you so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate it. If you're into this stuff, subscribe to the channel, give us a like, leave us a comment. You rock. Appreciate you. Once again, my name is Garrett Sussman of iPullRank. I will catch you next week. Peace out.